Some betrayals don't come with shouting or violence. They come quietly, wearing the faces of the people you trusted most. I never imagined that the end of my marriage would be measured in minutes, not in years of memories, not in shared sacrifices, but in how quickly I was told to gather my belongings and leave. What hurt the most wasn't the cold waiting outside the door. It was the calm certainty with which they decided I no longer belonged. When I married him, I chose love over legacy. I stepped away from a life where my name opened doors, where my future was secure long before I understood what security meant. I hid everything: my education, my background, my family's influence. I wanted to be loved without conditions, without advantages, without people kneeling to a name instead of knowing my heart. I wanted a simple life. In that simplicity, I made myself small. I learned quickly that being quiet made others comfortable. I smiled through dismissive remarks, swallowed disrespect, and convinced myself that patience was proof of strength. His family didn't see it that way. To them, silence was weakness, kindness was inferiority, and humility was something to be exploited. From the beginning, I was an outsider, pretending to belong. At family gatherings, I was present but unseen. Decisions were made around me, never with me. I noticed how conversations paused when I entered a room, how laughter resumed only after I sat quietly in a corner. I told myself it would change with time. I told myself love needed adjustment. I told myself many lies. What I didn't realize then was that I was being observed, measured, judged. My worth was constantly under review. I was not failing because I was unfaithful or careless. I was failing because I did not reflect the image they wanted attached to their family name. They wanted a symbol. I was a human being. Rumors began softly, almost politely. Suggestions disguised as concern. Questions that implied guilt before answers could exist. Each day, trust eroded a little more, not because I had done something wrong, but because I did not fight loudly enough to prove innocence. The cruelest part was watching my husband change without noticing he had changed at all. The man who once listened to me began listening about me instead. He became distant, not in anger, but in convenience. It was easier for him to accept their version of me than to confront the discomfort of defending me. I felt myself becoming a stranger in my own marriage. The night it ended was cold in a way that felt intentional, as if the world itself had decided to participate. Snow had been falling since afternoon, thick and relentless. The house felt tense, sharp, like every wall was holding its breath. I remember standing there, surrounded by the life I had built quietly and lovingly, realizing that none of it belonged to me anymore. I was no longer a wife in their eyes. I was a problem to be removed. There was no investigation, no pause for truth, just judgment. I was given a short time to leave, as if my presence had suddenly become toxic. I packed without thinking, hands moving automatically while my mind lagged behind reality. Every item I touched reminded me how deeply I had tried to belong, how thoroughly I had erased myself for acceptance. He didn't stop them. That silence is something I will never forget, not because it was loud, but because it was final. In that silence, I understood that love without protection is not love at all. It is permission for cruelty. When the door closed behind me, it felt heavier than any insult. The warmth vanished instantly. Snow soaked my shoes, numbing my feet, but I barely noticed. Pain has a way of choosing its own priority. I walked away without looking back. Not because I was strong, but because I knew that if I turned around, I would beg, and I refused to beg people who had already decided I was disposable. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes loneliness echo. My breath came out in thin clouds, fragile and temporary. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no protection, just the certainty that something irreversible had happened. I had been erased. What they didn't know, what no one in that house ever suspected, was that I had erased myself once before, voluntarily. I had hidden my identity so deeply that even I had begun to forget its weight. I had believed love required sacrifice, and I had sacrificed power, security, and recognition without hesitation. That night, standing in the snow with my life reduced to a bag in my hand, I realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time.
I had been pretending to be weak, and weakness had cost me everything. I found shelter in a small, almost invisible place, a room that barely fit my body and my grief. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and warmth felt like survival. As I sat alone in the dark, the silence finally allowed me to feel everything I had postponed. The humiliation burned first, then the betrayal, then the quiet devastation of realizing that I had loved people who never truly saw me. I cried until my chest hurt, until exhaustion dulled the pain into something manageable. Somewhere between tears and breath, clarity arrived. I understood that the woman they threw out was a version of me I had created for them, a softer, quieter, diminished version designed to be acceptable. That woman would not survive. So I let her go. I made a promise to myself in that small room, wrapped in borrowed warmth and borrowed time. I would not return to that life seeking forgiveness. I would not demand explanations. I would not expose my identity out of desperation. I would disappear first. And when I returned, it would be as the woman I was before love taught me to shrink. That night did not end my life. It began something far more dangerous. The days after I was thrown out blurred into one another, stitched together by exhaustion and uncertainty. I existed in a narrow space between shock and survival, where emotions were postponed because there was simply no time to feel them. Every morning, I woke up reminding myself that I was still alive. Every night, I fell asleep wondering how close I had come to not being. That small room became my entire world. Its walls were bare, its furniture borrowed, its air heavy with the smell of old paint and loneliness. Yet it gave me something the mansion never had: privacy. No judgment followed me there, no eyes measured my worth. For the first time in years, I could breathe without being evaluated. I learned quickly how fragile dignity could be. I learned how hunger humbles you, how cold sharpens your thoughts, how loneliness forces you to confront yourself honestly. There were nights when fear wrapped itself around me tighter than any blanket, nights when memories attacked without warning. His face, the house, the life I thought was permanent. But grief, I discovered, is not endless. It evolves. At first, it weakens you. Then, it teaches you. I began working wherever I could without questions, jobs that didn't care about my past, only my endurance. I kept my head down, my name simple, my history non-existent. No one knew who I had been, and that anonymity was both painful and freeing. It stripped me of status, but it also stripped me of expectations. In those early weeks, I lived in survival mode. Food was calculated, time was measured, hope was rationed carefully. Yet beneath that surface, something deeper was happening, a quiet reawakening, a memory of who I had been before I decided to disappear into someone else's life. Late at night, when exhaustion softened my defenses, I allowed myself to think about my past, the life I had abandoned, the education I had hidden, the connections I had ignored, the power I had pretended not to understand. For the first time, I didn't see that past as something shameful or excessive. I saw it as something I had earned. I remembered my father's insistence on discipline, my mother's quiet intelligence, the way strategy had been taught at our dinner table as naturally as manners. I remembered how I had understood systems, not just people,
how I had learned to read situations, anticipate outcomes, and move without being noticed. I hadn't lost those skills. I had only buried them. Slowly, deliberately, I began to rebuild. Not loudly, not dramatically. I updated credentials under a new name. I reached out to old contacts through secure channels, people who owed loyalty not to a name, but to competence. I didn't reveal my story. I didn't ask for sympathy. I offered value, and value always speaks. Days turned into months. My body grew stronger, my mind sharper, my emotions steadier. The woman who had cried herself to sleep in borrowed warmth began to feel distant, like a memory fading at the edges. Pain didn't disappear, but it transformed. It stopped being something that consumed me and became something that fueled me. I didn't follow my former life closely at first. I wasn't ready, but fragments reached me anyway. News headlines, whispered rumors, familiar names appearing in unexpected places. Their world continued, confident and unchanged, unaware that one of its quietest members was no longer watching from below. I didn't feel anger when I thought of them. I felt resolve. Revenge, I learned, doesn't begin with destruction. It begins with independence, with becoming so complete that the past loses its ability to define you. I wasn't interested in making them suffer blindly. I wanted them to understand, eventually, exactly what they had lost. Not a wife, a force. I took careful steps, never rushing. Every move was calculated, every decision intentional. I avoided emotional shortcuts. I refused to return fueled by bitterness alone. Power gained through rage is unstable. I wanted mine rooted in clarity. There were moments of doubt, of course, moments when loneliness returned unexpectedly, when I wondered if all of this effort was simply a complicated way of coping. But then I would remember the snow, the door closing, the silence where love should have been. And I would keep going. I built a new identity piece by piece, like assembling armor, a name that carried no history, a reputation built on results, not associations. People began to trust me not because of where I came from, but because of what I delivered. I became someone others relied on without knowing why. I became my greatest advantage.
Years ago, I had believed that love required transparency, that hiding parts of myself was dishonest. Now I understood the difference between secrecy and strategy. I wasn't hiding out of fear anymore. I was choosing when and how to be seen. One evening, as I looked at my reflection in a glass window, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I stood differently. Straighter, calmer, untouched by the need for approval. That was when I realized something important. The woman they had thrown out no longer existed. She had been replaced by someone far more dangerous, not because she wanted revenge, but because she no longer needed validation, because she had learned that worth does not require permission. I didn't know yet how or when our paths would cross again. I wasn't in a hurry. Time was finally on my side. I knew only one thing with certainty. When I returned to that world, it would not be as a wife seeking justice. It would be as a woman they could not ignore, and they would never see it coming. Power is not taken by force. It is earned in silence, in patience, and in the work others never notice. By the time years had passed, I had become almost unrecognizable, not in face or figure, but in presence. The woman who had shivered in the snow, clutching a bag and her dignity, had been replaced by someone deliberate, calculated, and unshakably composed. I had spent every stolen moment of freedom learning, building, and claiming the identity that had once been buried beneath love, humiliation, and expectation. I had honed my mind to a sharp edge, and my ambition, once dormant, now pulsed with clarity. Every decision I made was quiet, precise, and deliberate. I began acquiring small companies under a different name, ones that seemed unrelated, insignificant to anyone else. Yet each acquisition positioned me strategically, expanding influence invisibly. By the time I appeared publicly in boardrooms, I controlled networks that my former life could never have imagined. Their world, dependent on appearances and connections, moved confidently, while I grew in the shadows. I learned to use anonymity as a weapon. I observed people carefully, noting weaknesses, measuring pride, calculating patience. I watched his family from a distance, studying how they managed wealth, reputation, and power. Every misstep, every miscalculation became a silent advantage. The names, faces, and memories of those who had thrown me out did not consume me. Instead, they fueled a quiet resolve to return, not for vengeance in the traditional sense, but as a force undeniable and unavoidable. Life outside their world was harsh, but it refined me. I learned to survive in extremes: cold winters, tight budgets, demanding work environments. Each challenge polished my endurance. I studied law, finance, and strategy, immersing myself in subjects I had once taken lightly. By night, I mapped their corporate empire from afar, tracing the lines of influence, the gaps, the vulnerabilities. The world that had laughed at my simplicity now existed unknowingly under the shadow of my eventual return. During those years, I remained deliberately detached from emotion. The pain of betrayal became a tool, not a burden. Anger was stored, but never displayed. Instead, I practiced patience. I let the passage of time erode their assumptions, believing that distance would make my presence all the more shocking when it finally arrived. Opportunities appeared when I was ready to recognize them. A struggling company on the verge of bankruptcy became my first real instrument. With a few careful interventions, anonymously, strategically, I restored it to profitability. The owners never knew who had saved them, only that the solution seemed almost magical, almost inevitable. That was the kind of power I had learned to wield, invisible yet undeniable. While they assumed I had disappeared forever, I cultivated networks of trust and influence in silence. I became a figure of quiet authority in circles that once would have ignored me. Invitations that once would have felt irrelevant now reached my inbox, each an opportunity to expand reach and gather intelligence. The more I learned, the more I realized how fragile their world truly was, built on pride and reputation rather than substance. And yet, I never lost sight of myself in this climb. My compassion remained intact, though disciplined. I helped people quietly, anonymously, offering second chances in ways I knew they could never boast of publicly. That, I realized, was the true strength of someone who had once been powerless, the ability to act without expectation, to influence without needing recognition. Then came the moment when their worlds and mine began to intersect. I noticed small hints at first, in news articles, social media mentions, and business reports. Their empire was struggling in subtle ways. Mismanagement, arrogance, and overconfidence were creating cracks in structures they had assumed unbreakable, and I, having mastered patience and strategy, had learned to apply leverage at exactly the right moment. The thought of confrontation never consumed me. I did not seek to humiliate or destroy. Instead, I envisioned a return that would demonstrate inevitability, that the choices they had made, the cruelty they had inflicted, had been steps in the process that now elevated me. I had become a force that they could not dismiss or manipulate, a presence they could neither deny nor claim to understand. I spent nights planning not for revenge, but for positioning. I considered every possible outcome, every move they might make, every risk they would take, and in every calculation, I imagined the moment when my anonymity would finally dissolve, revealing the full measure of the woman they had cast aside. Through it all, I remained patient. The years of survival had taught me that timing is everything. Too soon, and pride and ego might fight back. Too late, and opportunity may vanish. I learned to wait, to trust in the accumulation of knowledge, strategy, and quiet influence.
When the first opportunities aligned, I began making subtle interventions in their business. Contracts shifted in my favor without their knowledge. Decisions they thought were their own proved to be influenced by me, guided by my unseen hand. Slowly, steadily, the foundation they had taken for granted began to bend to the reality I had constructed. The feeling was intoxicating, though I never let it overwhelm me. I had not returned to gloat. I had returned to reclaim a world that had once ignored me, to exist visibly as the woman I had always been capable of becoming. I had learned that power is most compelling when it is earned quietly, exercised carefully, and revealed at the precise moment that ensures recognition without dispute. And still, in every silent observation, in every careful maneuver, I remembered the snow, the door, the silence, the moment when love failed and humiliation began. It remained a compass, guiding me, reminding me of the stakes, of what had been lost and what had been earned in its absence. The woman who had been discarded had been reborn. She was deliberate, patient, and unstoppable. And soon, the world that had once rejected her would be forced to acknowledge her presence, not as a wife, not as a mistake, but as a force undeniable and complete. The moment I stepped back into the orbit of their world, I did so not as the woman they had dismissed, but as someone they could not ignore. Years of careful planning, silent growth, and invisible influence had brought me to a place where my presence was inevitable, unavoidable, undeniable. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation, though no one knew yet why. Their empire, once assumed stable, was now subtly under my control. Each decision they celebrated as triumph unknowingly aligned with my strategy. Contracts, investments, reputations, they all moved along paths I had meticulously prepared. I had not acted out of spite, nor had I sought to destroy them in a single blow. True power, I had learned, manifests quietly and waits patiently for the moment when the world can no longer dismiss it. I observed them carefully at first. The arrogance, the complacency, the misplaced confidence, all of it served to reinforce the precision of my plan. I did not rush. I did not gloat. I allowed the contrast between my past weakness and my present strength to exist silently, like a shadow growing behind them. They remained unaware, comfortable in their assumption that I had disappeared into nothingness, that I had been erased. Then came the first encounter that required subtle visibility. My influence had already begun to reshape their business in ways they could not yet identify. I attended meetings under my new identity, a figure of authority and capability they respected without understanding the full depth of my connection. I did not reveal my past, not yet. Instead, I allowed competence, calm intelligence, and undeniable results to speak for me. Every interaction was deliberate, every action calculated. The subtlety was intoxicating. I watched them scramble to respond to challenges that I had quietly anticipated. Decisions they thought were their own proved to be aligned with my strategy. They began to see me as an ally, a powerful force in their circles, while remaining blind to the fact that I was the same woman they had once cast into the snow. The memory of that night remained my guide. I remembered the cold, the humiliation, the quiet betrayal, and I allowed it to inform the precision of my actions. Every move I made carried with it the echoes of what had been done to me. I had transformed the pain into clarity, the betrayal into
strategy, the exile into preparation. Finally, the moment of revelation arrived. I chose it carefully, as all moments of true power must be chosen. The culmination was not a confrontation of shouting or anger, but a measured unveiling. I allowed the room to recognize my face, my voice, my presence, not as a ghost of their past, but as a figure of authority they could not deny. Every whisper, every glance, every realization of who I had become rippled through them like a shockwave. I did not speak first. I let silence do the work. In that silence, the weight of memory, humiliation, and lost opportunity became unbearable. Their astonishment, their confusion, their regret, it was tangible, almost suffocating. And yet, I remained composed, deliberate, untouchable. The reckoning was not just theirs, it was also mine. I had survived, I had grown, I had transformed a life that was stolen into a power they could not comprehend. And in that transformation, I had found a freedom deeper than revenge, stronger than anger, more enduring than the validation I once sought. They had underestimated me, they had cast me aside, and yet, here I stood, the architect of their reality without them even knowing it until now. My presence alone redefined every misjudgment, every false assumption, every act of cruelty they had committed. I realized in that moment that true revenge is not measured in destruction, it is measured in return, in presence, in the undeniable assertion that the world underestimated you and now must recognize the full force of your existence. The snow of that night years ago had not frozen me, it had purified me. It had shown me that survival requires more than endurance, it requires vision, patience, and strategy. And in the years I had spent building myself, I had become someone who could not be removed again. As I stood there, watching the impact of my presence unfold, I felt no anger. I felt clarity. I felt triumph not over others, but over the circumstances that had once rendered me powerless. I had become the woman I had always been capable of being, and the world, finally, was forced to acknowledge it. This was the true power of identity, patience, and resilience. The woman they had thrown out was gone. In her place stood someone unshakable, undeniable, and unforgettable, and nothing in the world could take her down again.